Hello, and I am Iverina. As you can see, these are the research questions that guided the development of the conceptual framework for this research. The questions covered the type of industry, technology, and occupational level that would influence the IR4 skills required. It is an important aspect to understand about technology advancement, which is the technology life cycle, which has the stages of emerging, growth, maturity, and saturation. So in the context of this discussion, it is anticipated that IR4 technologies will also follow the technology life cycle and will eventually be integrated with other technologies. So how do we impart the skills required to utilize these IR4 technologies? One of the approaches would be to provide access to learning IR4 technologies via TVET. This is because TVET is defined as technical education that trains individuals for a particular vocation. It can also be considered as cost-effective because it trains the workforce in a shorter time span. So why is TVET considered as a cost-effective way to train IR4 skills? This is due to the design of TVET curriculum that is based on the competency units, which allow for shorter training periods and faster turnaround time for assessment and certification. So in a situation where time is of the essence, mapping the IR4 skills required by industries is effective as the workers or students are familiar with the work process. It is also effective because they are only required to learn knowledge and skills on how to utilize the IR4 technologies that will optimize the work process in their respective industries. What are the common elements of TVET curriculum? Research by APEC in 2014 on the different forms of TVET curriculum in several countries highlighted that the main components that are common between these curriculum documents are that they are industry-specific, according to occupational levels, and include the components of knowledge, skills, attitude, and tools used. So why should IR4 skills be mapped to industry requirements? Based on the common elements that define TVET curriculum, this research will map the IR4 skills according to IR4 technologies used, occupational level, and industry that applies the skills. So when we map these skills to industry requirements, they will become industry specific. Thus easier for workers to apply the skills at their place of work because they are more familiar with them. Next is methods. Search strategies. Several searches were conducted on Scopus and Web of Science databases with fewer hits on Web of Science as compared to Scopus. A combination of the following keywords were used with the Boolean operator AND, such as Fourth Industrial Revolution, Industrial Revolution 4.0, and Conceptual Framework. In terms of document analysis, it was conducted on literature to identify the main themes of the research. Following this was thematic analysis based on the variables of the research, which were IR4 skills, IR4 technologies, occupational levels, and industry clusters. So findings from this conceptual study resulted in a conceptual framework. In order to minimize bias, several combinations of search strings were used. The searches were conducted in both Scopus and Web of Science where duplicate documents were omitted. Other sources of input such as government reports were referred in the document analysis. The range of years that the documents were published was between the year 2016 until 2021. Findings. The initial search of theories, models, and frameworks actually provided minimal results, especially in terms of factors that influence IR4 skills. Therefore, the search strategy was changed to accommodate theories or models related to technology acceptance instead of IR4 skills. This is based on the assumption that when a certain technology is accepted for its ease of use, then this would motivate an individual to acquire the skills required to utilize the technology in their field of work. So we can see here that other findings in terms of the conceptual framework. Based on the improved search strategy, the framework that was deemed suitable was a technological, organizational, and environmental framework developed by Tonetsky and Fleischer in the year 1990. So this framework was used to study how technological, organizational, and environmental contexts affect the acceptance of innovation and technological advancement at an organizational level, which also is the unit of analysis for this research. So what are the TOE framework elements? They are technological context, organizational context, and environmental context. So this framework studies how the aforesaid contexts affect the acceptance of innovation and technological advancement in an organization. Therefore, in this particular research, the contexts that are included as variables in the conceptual framework are: for organizational context, this research will study the occupational levels. For technological context, this research will study IR4 technologies. And for environmental context, this research will study the industry cluster. Technology acceptance, which is usually measured in the TOE framework kind of research, in this research will instead be the IR4 skills required based on the three contexts that will be studied. So here we can see the conceptual framework. As you can see, here are the three main variables of the conceptual framework, which are technological, organizational, and environmental. So all these three variables are independent variables. You can see here is the list of the IR4 technologies under technological. List of occupational levels, we will focus on management, supervisory, and operational level for organizational context. And under environmental, we will focus on the industry cluster, which are the manufacturing industry, production industry, and services industry. So the independent variable is the IR4 skills. So in terms of the IR4 technology, they have been shortlisted based on the technologies listed in the Industry Forward Policy and National 4IR Policy. So in the National 4IR Policy has streamlined the technologies into 5 foundational 4IR technologies, where these lists of foundational technologies would facilitate enhancing the curriculum to focus on these building blocks. In terms of occupational levels, they are generally divided into operational, supervisory, and managerial levels. So these are based on the occupational structures by DST and in the MOSQF and occupational classification specified in MASCO. Industry cluster. The clusters are based on industries listed in the Malaysian Standard Industrial Classification or MSIC under the Department of Statistics Malaysia, where the grouping of these industries are not only based on the common process of work process and output, but also on the Clark-Fisher model, which depicts economic growth as stages of economy that a country is currently in. So these 4 stages: primary stage, the secondary stage, and tertiary stage, and also quaternary. Based on the characteristics of industries defined in MSIC 2008 in the Clark-Fisher model, the proposed industry clusters are production, manufacturing, and services. Although some would argue that the scope of the research would be too wide to accommodate all these 3 industry clusters. However, it is important for this research to ensure that all 3 industry clusters are represented when analyzing the influence of industry cluster on IR4 skills in order to observe the significance of its relationship. In terms of IR4 skills, they are operationally defined in this research as skills required by a worker in a working environment that applies IR4 technologies. So these skills are the dependent variable of this research and are categorized according to soft skills and technical skills. This is based on findings of research by Amrun E. 2020 that identified 2 sets of 4 IR skills. This is further supported by the research by Barrick 2020, which applied both activity-based and attributed-based approaches to define generic skills. According to Barrick, they distinguish between generic skills based on activity-based perspective and attribute perspective. The research by Barrick showed that the generic skills were interdependent on the context of the profession. This research in particular recognizes the activity-based skills as technical skills and attribute-based skills as soft skills. So the list of IR4 skills studied in the research are also based on the synthesis of various reports such as in occupational framework analysis and also previous research. As you can see, the impact of the conceptual framework would be to increase access to upskilling and reskilling of individuals to be skilled in IR4 technologies, and also that TVET curriculum can be updated with IR4 skills according to particular industry requirements. In terms of SDG, it will also have an impact on the quality of education and decent work and economic growth. In conclusion, the framework can be referred by educators and curriculum developers when updating TVET curriculum to include IR4 skills. And with the advent of this framework, the IR4 skills can be embedded in tertiary education, thus enhancing graduate employability and also be used to train existing workers via TVET. Mapping of the IR4 skills to various industries will increase access to upskilling and reskilling of individuals to be skilled in IR4. Thank you. Please share your thoughts on this research by scanning this QR code.